this next session is jam-packed, so I want us to kick off immediately. It's called Cracking the Code: How Companies Partner with NPOs. You know, in all of our sessions that we have, whether it be our webinars, our feedback to the conference, just networking and listening to you, you know, this is such a fundamental element of the development sector work that all of you do, both as NPOs and as corporates as well. And it's not just about the cash in hand. You know, we've heard from speakers over the past 2 days about support and resources, you know, and how we partner together as corporates and NPOs to do the impactful work that will change South Africa. So I think it's really key. And we've heard various elements of the funding process, from, you know, how to do funding applications to monitoring and learning and evaluation, which we heard this morning in the first panel. So that's all key in terms of how do we ensure that funding is sought, funding is secured, and most importantly, that the funding is impactful. You know, as I mentioned, both monetary funding, but also resources that often corporates can provide to NPOs as well, in their skills and the insights that they have within their organizations. So I'm just going to run you through how the program works for this afternoon. But before we do that, you know, she's been getting a round of applause for everyone else. But as a matter of record, please can we give a massive round of applause to Nozipho Chabalala. You know, as a broadcaster and newsman in my previous life, you know, I really am marveled by her ability to drive conversations. And I think we need to find a better word than moderator, you know, because she really engages in the conversation. She's such a deep listener and is able to drive rich conversations forward. And all our guests and delegates and panelists remark how comfortable she makes them feel, even though underneath that there may be the nerves. So thank you to Nozipho Chabalala. I hope that she sees this, and she probably will. So yeah, just an opportunity to say thank you to her. Now, the program for this afternoon will run as follows. As I'd mentioned, it's called Cracking the Code: How Companies Partner with NPOs. We've got 6 corporate representatives from our sponsors. So thank you very much to all of them for making themselves available, for willing to share their insights as well on their funding practices, what they've learned, what they look for as well, and how they can make partnering with their organizations and corporates in general more impactful. So thank you to them. FirstRand, Absa, Telkom, Sanlam Foundation, the MTN Foundation as well. I know I'm forgetting one name, and MTN Foundation, Absa, FirstRand, and Telkom and Sanlam Foundation. Yeah, and that's it, eh? And for and Vodacom. Thank you. So, and then also from our, we've also selected NPOs who are able to share their learnings as well from the other end of the spectrum. You know, because it's so key in terms of the work that's done, that it's not just a one-way conversation about this is what works. And I think it's important to hear from NPOs and their journeys as well. And these were NPOs that we selected from our research that we publish every year from the handbook, our Business and Society handbook as well. So it really is deep research and using the research that we have accumulated over time. So thank you very much to the Kriel Bambanani team, to Funda Wande as well, and Little Eden for sharing their insights with you today. So I'd like to call up the first group of panelists, and what they will do is each give you a 5-minute presentation on their organizations, followed then by 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. So I'll take Q&A from the virtual platform, so please do share your questions on that as well. But we'll also have a roving mic in the audience as well, if there's anything that comes to mind during the conversation or while one of the other questions are being answered as well. Then we'll bring the second group of panelists on, and we'll follow the same format as I've just described, and then followed by the final two to have a rich discussion. And I think it's going to be this session is an hour and a half. but I think we're going to find that the time is going to whiz by. So let's get straight into it. I'd now like to welcome Mandla Mbuyazi, who leads impact investment and ideation for the FirstRand Foundation and FirstRand Empowerment Foundation. Welcome, Mandla. You can come up on stage. I'd also like to welcome Ernesta Teesen. She's the marketing manager at the Kriel Bambanani. If she could join us on stage as well. Thank you very much, Ernesta. And then Shelly Majola. She is the special regulation and compliance manager at the MTN SA Foundation, overseeing financial operations, governance, and ensuring budgets effectively support initiatives that empower underserved communities across the country. So thank you to Mandla, Ernesta, and Shelly, if they could join me on stage. To my speakers, thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you.
Because the program is quite packed, the 5 minutes is quite tight in your address, but no doubt there will be questions that will come up in the Q&A session where we can expand on any other ideas as well. So Mandla, let's open with you.
Thank you very much. When the brief was sent, the 5 minutes was underlined, and there was the fact that there's going to be a bell ringing at the end of 5 minutes. So I'm a bit nervous. So I decided to write some of my notes just to ensure that whatever I need to get out there gets out there. And also it's a graveyard shift, but luckily we've got a good speaker afterwards, so we have people in the room. I would have wondered how it would have looked otherwise. So my name is Mandla Mbuyazi. I lead impact investment and ideation for our foundations, FirstRand Foundation and FirstRand Empowerment Foundation. We've got 9 strategic focus areas across both foundations. On the FirstRand Foundation, we've got quality education at the foundation phase and primary education. We've got building thriving and resilient communities, which focuses on sports, arts and culture, and then also the green economy in the communities. We have capacity building as the other strategic pillar, and we've got financial inclusion that cuts across those pillars. And FirstRand Foundation is our CSI, arm for FirstRand, 1% of donation net profit after tax. And then we've got FirstRand Empowerment Foundation, which also we have got quality education at the top there, which engages quality education and higher education. We have healthcare value chains where we focus on, it's a BE trust, let me put it that way, that focuses on empowerment in the healthcare value chain. Then we've got gender-based violence and femicide, and then we've got agri-systems where we focus on graduating farmers from emerging to commercial, and then we've got a climate change response. So at FirstRand, sorry.
It always happens.
Yeah. We've come to learn that true partnership is not defined by structure, but by intention. So I know that we've been speaking about collaboration for the past 2 days. It's part of the graveyard shift thing. That's why we start with a simple idea. Collaboration, we need to collaborate across capital borders, across borders. And the question is what borders? There's capital borders. If you engage in terms of the type of funding that we provide, I've got the privilege of engaging both grant funding and impact investment, which seeks financial return alongside impact. And then there's a sectoral boundaries that exist. We are a financial services, but we are also privileged to have partners from clients that we serve, which is across sectors, which is quite great. And then also there are organizational boundaries that exist. But these boundaries are only real because we allow them to be, right? When we partner with NPOs, we are not just blending funding with goodwill, but we are challenging each other to think differently, to approach development not just as benefactors and beneficiaries, but also as co-creators for change. which tends to feel a little bit like we are slowing down, which is because whenever we start engaging on the co-creation element, it seems as if we want to take 2 steps back, which is important for the collaboration piece. And that starts with collaborating on the right things. So we take time to unpack the problem together with our NPOs. We unpack, not just NPOs, guys, as NPOs and other type of funders that are on the table, unpack the problem together from our respective vantage points. We align on principles, not just goals, and create a space for robust, honest debate, because tension, when respected, sharpens purpose. Tension when respected, it sharpens purpose. It's important, let's not run away from it, because when we do, then we are not honest around the table, then we end up starting something, and then 2 years later, nothing has happened, and then we blame the process. Tension must be accepted. But more importantly, it's about how we collaborate. We approach activity that lifts insights. Through prototypes, through experiments, through proof of concepts. So we first want to lift insights. We also enable development. We take what works, we scale wide or scale deep, chasing the multiplicative factor or additionality to accelerate what works. And then we scale by crowding like-minded partners, government, business, and society. What I wanted to add there is that is the 5 minutes over?
I'll give you 15 seconds. I ate into your 15.
Whoa.
Your 5 minutes. Go ahead.
To close it, saying that with all of that, we first acknowledge that we are not experts in the field as funders, which allows us to remain curious. So on the table, whenever we engage with our NPOs, we acknowledge the fact that they are on the ground, we are not. So we're not just going to put money, walk away, or put money and demand, but we're going to engage together. The NPOs we've engaged with would know this. We sit down, we ask questions. The impact conversation is a deep and meaningful conversation that needs to happen for us to chase impact.
Mandla, thank you very much. Ernesta, I now hand over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I'm Ernesta from Kriel, Bambanani. We work in the space of helping children and youth at risk in 2 programs, one the old orphanage or residential care, and the others in the community, where the need is for children to be safe or receive services without being removed from the family. Our biggest challenge is definitely the funding or being sustainable. I think we're all quite aware of the challenges in terms of government funding and the struggles. So a while ago, we have identified that this is going to be a problem, a long-standing problem. And we've established a marketing and fundraising department within the NGO to address the shortcomings from funding from government, and also established a third stream income source to actually supplement those income. It hasn't been an easy journey because working in the NGO field, I think we often forget that we lack the business part of the operations. That is not our core function, to be in the business space. So first of all, I think we undersell our services, trying to do the alignment with different business objectives. We undersell our services and just narrow it down, which also makes it difficult for us to tap into funding. So a good practice for us was to align with businesses and their objectives. We've got the skills to do the work, and yes, the corporate has the funding or the resources to help us to do that. But in aligning those 2 objectives, it's also not easy to do without losing your mission. It's always important to stay true to your mission and do what you do, but it does not really hold you back in adapting your services or just adding value. For us to tap into the corporate space or the corporate resources was definitely to offer them a value proposition. We are not just on the receiving end. We looked at co-branding, co-hosting initiatives, fundraising initiatives where we can not just receive but work with the corporates. Also, in getting our compliance right, what the corporates need, all the documentation, to have it ready, and focusing to be the leader in your space, do the research in what is the best, you deliver the best services so that your funder or the corporate can also rely on you. Putting you out there, sometimes donors or corporates will not always know about the organization because we're so busy with our own work that you don't put yourself out there, you don't do the marketing to say, listen, here we are, instead of the organization going looking for the funding where you are identifiable. All of this sounds good. I mean, at this stage, about 37% of our funding is from corporates. We have seen an increase. What we would have liked is the multi-year funding. That when we have single funding or just the donation, it makes it very difficult to plan. Corporates always ask for how will you scale? Will you be able to feed more children? Will you provide more services? It's very difficult if you don't know whether you're going to have enough money to just fund your current programs. So for a good partnership, I think open conversation, there's a responsibility on both sides and accountability. So once that is established and the communication is open, there's always room for improvement, negotiation and change.
Thank you very much, Ernesta. I like that. Ending of always negotiation and change. Shelly, I hand over to you.
All right. Thank you very much. Afternoon, colleagues from the various industries. It's a pleasure to be in this space this afternoon. I mean, guys, kudos to Trialog for putting together such an amazing conference, bringing together implementers, visionaries with the funders and the donors. Yesterday at the MTN stand, I engaged with quite a number of the NPOs. They were asking a lot of questions about what MTN Foundation does and how they can partner with us, and also questions around our funding process that we follow within MTN Foundation. So I'll just touch base on how we identify our implementing partners, so NPOs. Obviously, it's through Trialog conferences such as these, where we are in one space and we can engage and network and find out what the other NPOs and other funders are doing in the various spaces that we play in. And then we also have a platform, a digital platform where NPOs can upload their proposals. It's called DevMen, D-E-V-Men. They can upload their proposals there, and then we can just review if there's a strategic alignment. So as MTN, we play in the space of education and digital or ICT skills development. We also did a program in financial literacy. Yeah, but currently we're not playing in the space of health, sports, just to keep that in mind. And then we also identify some of our NPOs through the Department of Basic Education, for example, the Department of Social Development. They have databases of NPOs that are credible, so we also reach out to the various stakeholders in the sectors that we participate in. And then also with our implementing partners, we normally follow the procurement process, whether it's an RFQ or an RFP, depending on the nature of the service that we require, and then we'll follow the technical evaluation process. And then some of the documents that we require so that we can vet the NPO will be your tax compliance, just just to make sure that the NPO complies with the tax legislation in the country. Obviously, the company registration certificate is also required, and then the original bank confirmation letter. I insist on that as the finance person to make sure that we are paying the right person. And in some instances, we also require the triple BEE certificate. It depends on the type of program that we are doing. And then also we require an NPO to be at least in existence for over a year and have governance structures in place. For example, in most of our programs, NPOs are going to be dealing with personal information from the beneficiaries. So we require them to have governance structures to make sure that they can comply with legislation such as the POPI Act. And then also within MTN as due diligence, we ensure that if there's any conflict of interest with any of our employees, that is declared up front. And then I'll just move on to the working practices and funding. I like what the gentleman over there was alluding to earlier, that it's a collaboration and a continuous conversation and communication. It's very important between the funders and the NPOs, not just throwing money and then, or just ticking a compliance box exercise and then just folding your arms. Actually holding each other's hands and working together throughout this journey to make sure that we impact the communities that are underserved. So in our programs, we normally, when it comes to funding, we normally do either an MOU or a legal agreement between 12 to 24 months. And then normally the funding will then be done in milestones. So we'll give the NPO milestones that they need to meet. So depending on the stats and the comprehensive report that they're going to be giving back to us, and then we also do our monitoring and evaluation to make sure, for instance, surveys that are going to be given to some of the beneficiaries for them to complete, to just measure the amount of positive impact that our program has had on the beneficiaries. And then I'll just paint a picture of an ideal NPO. I know I'm going to run out of time soon. It is just an NPO that has the same level of passion for the initiatives that are undertaken, a sound one, operationally sound, with good work ethic and integrity. I must say the MTN Foundation team, big ups to them. They are a group of very passionate people, so we need an NPO that is going to drive our programs with the same level of passion. And also just lastly to mention, MTN encourages a culture of listening and treating everyone with dignity and care. So we require our partners' conduct to be aligned to this value. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shelly, on that. Thank you to all our panelists. I think that was a great jump off for our conversation and the Q&A. I want to touch on a number of important points each of you mentioned, around firstly there's the strategic alignment, because you're working together on what is hopefully a multi-year project, right, to really see that scale and that impact growing into the project and also the impact that you're having on people's lives. But I want to come to the compliance one first, because I think, Ernesta, you touched on it indirectly to say, look, this is what we do. We are experts in terms of what we do on the ground, the communities that we are able to connect with. We've done it for a long time, but our the business management of its stuff, the administration of it, that side of it is maybe not where the strength of the organization aligns. And that brings me to my other point around, we've seen in the past where, whether it's government funding or perhaps even funding to requests to corporates falling short, not because the project isn't impactful, but because there are necessary hygiene aspects that are missing. Just because the NPO maybe doesn't have the wherewithal to be able to do that. Mandla, let me start with you. How do we get over that element of it? How does a corporate, in FirstRand's instance, how do you support NPOs, small businesses, whether it's on that ESD side, to say, look, this is how you run your business. Not necessarily the work that you do, but to keep your business going, whether it's, financial management, marketing, any other business administrative factors.
So it's multifaceted. I think we started the fact that supporting NPOs, and we've seen these problems over time through our fiduciary process. And when we engage with an NPO and there are certain documents that are missing and there are documents that need to be engaged or need to be in place, we seek to work with them in order to be able to achieve that. So it's not like we're just going to walk away and say, okay, no, we're moving our money somewhere else to engage that. But also, as I mentioned earlier, one of our strategic pillars is capacity building, and capacity building is for all of our implementation partners, and then also for the partners that we engage with. So in fact, at the moment as we speak, we currently in advanced stages engaging a capacity building program that will specifically focus on this thing, because what ends up happening is that the issue is that you end up having the same old type of faces appearing to you, seeking for funding, and we need to, but knowing that there's more hands on deck in the space, and we need to change the face. But when we engage in the NPOs, some are at grassroots levels, some are at maturing stages, and some are requiring bespoke support. But yeah, as a foundation, we put a budget aside to support NPOs so that this hurdle is crossed. From an ESD perspective, there's an F&B angle as well. F&B does run a program that supports SMMEs from a capacity building perspective as well, on matters of governance, matters of strategy, leadership, etc., etc. So we are working on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shelly, from MTN's point of view, and obviously your role in compliance, and those are necessary aspects of any fiduciary responsibility. How does MTN look at that capacity building, or the feedback and the learnings that come from applications that are maybe incomplete or unsuccessful?
All right, I'm proud to say that MTN is a level 1 BBBE contributor. So as part of the 12 points that we earn on the SED, we partner with NPOs and other implementing partners that are not maybe that developed, especially on the admin side. We have a transformation and a BBBE team that has an incubation program that those NPOs and those implementing partners can be part of. And that's where we capacitate them and actually hold their hands in making sure that they develop. And also, I think me, on a personal level, in dealing with the NPOs that we deal with in some of the programs, I go to even an extent of actually showing them how to draft an invoice, showing them how to draft a statement, how to reconcile their financial systems, and sharing remittances with them, and actually assisting them to make sure that they are capacitated and they can operate in the space that they're in efficiently.
Okay. I want to go to the Q&A platform, and thank you. Warren Povia has posed a question, or hypothetical question, Mandla, to you, and we can get to that as well. I just want to remind our audience, both in person and virtual, to please add your questions to the Q&A. We will also open it up to the floor as well. But Warren says, for Mandla, hypothetical scenario, and please, Ernesta, I'm going to come to you after this as well. Would you be willing to pay the same amount to Ernesta, but instead of impacting 1,000 children, you impact 500 children, but you have helped the NGO become more sustainable? So I think what he's saying is that same financial injection, looking to, instead of it going to width, as in number of children you support, in this instance, you're actually saying fewer children, but Ernesta's able to plan and say, well, this funding is going to last me, 3 to 5 years. So, how would that hypothetically fit in with you? Let me come to you first, Mandla.
hypothetical questions are not always hypothetical, but let's engage it as it is. So there's no one-way answer. There's no one-way answer. As I had mentioned, that when we approach ideation, we put it in 3 buckets. We lift insights, we enable development, and then we scale for impact. When we are lifting insights, that's when we engage things like that. It's part of the conversation to kind of distinguish what are we chasing for. The question is, who is the beneficiary on the other side, right? And who's the potential beneficiary? So if we're engaging with an NPO that is still growing, who's the potential beneficiary in the space that they do? So they could be working on something that not a lot of people are working on, at a space where not a lot of people are working on. So I would look at it from a proof of concept perspective or from an experimental perspective, which will then be part of the portfolio, but from a point of what are we testing? It must be very clear when you get in there. What are we engaging? What are we testing? And in this case, there must be a link to the beneficiary. There must be a link to the beneficiary.
Okay. Ernesta, to extend that hypothetical from your lens?
Yes, I think that would be very beneficial, because we must remember recently I had a comment from a donor saying that no, when they look at an application, the percentage of the donation that goes to the beneficiary must be greater than the percentage that goes to the organization. Understandably so, but in the end you do need staff to execute your duty. You need the development of those staff. If you don't have them, you cannot serve more beneficiaries. You cannot make a greater impact. And that is sometimes misunderstood. To strengthen the hands and the operations of the organization in the long term will definitely have a bigger impact. Again, if I can give the example of where we do not want to be reliant on corporates. We are trying to do our own income generation, but we are not experts at that. We keep banging our heads. There's a whole lot of time wasted in actually sitting there and planning, whereas we can have the support, not necessarily financial. I mean, the skills-based volunteering is very, very valuable to us. But the biggest thing, I think, is in the commitment, in a long-term project. The short-term things makes it extremely difficult for us to say, listen, yes, we are going to engage in that. It's time-consuming, it is financially, it's resources, it's very difficult. So for us, a long-term commitment and a partnership, meaning a commitment from the corporates, is very much valuable, way more valuable. So yes, definitely.
I want to move to alignment, and if there are any questions from the audience, could you just raise your hand, and then I know to come to you while we've got the first group of panelists on the stage. You know, we mentioned alignment, and I imagine that if one likens it to a marriage, the likelihood of success of a shotgun marriage, you know, I think is less than, you know, if you spend time, you're aligning. How is it, Mandla, from your perspective, how much time and effort does the FirstRand Foundation and the various, you know, organizations linked as well spend in terms of aligning and making sure that, you know, you're working with the right organization, but that you're also right for the organization as well?
Sorry. I'm glad you brought that back to me. I needed to highlight the fact that as well, we do look at sustainable funding. Whenever we go to engage and partner with NPOs, it's important for us that we are not the only funder in the space. It's important that they've got other funders. It's important that we understand what their business development strategy is, because then we do get stuck. Because of the high value that we put in wanting to keep the program sustainable, when the 3 years comes to an end and the funder and the NPO does not have additional support, then I mean everybody becomes feels guilty, and it's a bad marriage, if you want to call it that. So, but in terms of aligning with NPOs, I would say it's a case-by-case situation. I've been in this space. I hail from a commercial space, and I just started in this space. I've been a year in the space, but in the year I've been in this space, I've seen proposals. I've seen a proposal landing and taking 6 weeks to 8 weeks, but I've also seen ideas that have been cooking for a good 6 months to 12 months. So there's an element of cooking the idea. There's an element of aligning with the counterparts. Then there's an element of is the proposal ready for us to then engage in terms of funding. So it's a journey. I don't have a straightforward answer, but I would say it's a conversation.
Okay. Ernesta, from your perspective in terms of aligning, are there instances where you maybe walk away from a donor because, of the, what they may put on the table or need? How do you work through that process?
Yes, walking away from a donor, no, not really. In our instance, aligning with the objectives of the business objectives of the donor is sometimes that we have to move out of our core business. Because in the end, being an NGO, you've got a mission. You are there for the greater good. Yes, I'll probably be crucified for saying that it's not all about the funding. It's for the greater good. So if you approach a donor and say they are more aligned with environmental protection, nothing is stopping us from making our operations environmentally friendly. It is for the greater good. The children that we care for can only benefit from that. In the long run, everybody can benefit from that. So then we will definitely, if we can get the support and the commitment again from the funder, and it's not going to really impact on our core business, it is something that we will definitely take on, not necessarily for our organization, but like I said, for the greater good. And in that, it's building trust and collaboration and networking. You never know who you will find or where we can learn. Like I said, we can always learn from the corporates. So yes, it's not always easy, but we do.
Perfect timing, Ernesta, as our lights flash at us here. I want to thank you, Mandla, Ernesta, Shelly. Thank you very much for your contributions. I think you've really opened up the conversation. I know we could have each of you here for much longer, in fact, the full panel up here, but thank you very much for your contributions. And if anyone wants to grab you afterwards, whether they ask you any questions, any input, please feel free. They will be around afterwards as well. But thank you, Mandla. Thank you, Shelly. Thank you, Ernesta. Just a reminder, thank you for the questions that have come through. Just a reminder, you can ask them on the Q&A platform. Thank you for the comments as well coming through on the platform. And if you would like to ask a question following any of the addresses, please do. We do have roving mics. Just put up your hand and I will come to you. I'd now like to welcome up Nonhlanhla Magagula from Absa. She's the head of corporate citizenship programs at Absa. So her portfolio oversees the delivery of entrepreneurship initiatives, the Absa CSI Trust, and the employee volunteering portfolio as well. So thank you very much, Nonhlanhla. I'd also like to welcome up Zolani Metu. He is from Funda Wande. He's the head of programs there. If he can join me up on stage. The Funda Wande falls within the Alan and Jill Gray Philanthropies South Africa. He's a Mandela Rhodes Scholar with a passion for social and education reform in South Africa. And our final panelist joining us for this round is Nathi Kunene. He's the Corporate Social Investment Senior Manager at the Telkom Foundation. He's leading the operations at the foundation and has more than 20 years experience in the development sector. So thank you very much to my current panelists who've come to join me here. Just a reminder, thank you. Yes, please give them a round of applause for sharing their insights with us today. Nonhlanhla, let me start with you. From an Absa now I'm jumping the gun. I want to hear from you. Please, let's start with you and give us your brief from Absa.
Thank you so much, Sheldon. I think maybe just to kick off, to start with a pause and to say thank you to the civil society organizations that are in the room, right? I think we can't do what we do without everyone that's on the ground. There's a radio station that I listen to, and they've currently been doing a feature on substance abuse. And they've been talking about how substance abuse is affecting communities. I mean, one of the features talks about how 3-year-olds in that particular community are sniffing glue because they're trying to suppress hunger. So you are the organizations that have to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. You are the ones that are trying to solution with the limited resources that you have. So I think for me, Sheldon, it was important to just say, let's pause and say thank you to civil society organizations that are here.
Thank you for that, Nonhlanhla.
Yeah, and then from an Absa point of view, I mean, the question is, right, how do we identify the organizations that we fund? So there's both an unsolicited approach and a solicited approach, and I think it's important to start there. We don't know what we don't know, so unsolicited proposals are very much welcome in terms of our space. And then we also do solicited, right? Because we then say there's a particular agenda that we're trying to drive, and in driving that agenda, who is out there that we can come alongside? We speak about alignment. You touched on alignment as well. It's about mission alignment. When we say mission alignment, what are we talking about? It's the what and the how, right? So what are you doing as an organization, and how are you doing it? Because the how of you getting to a particular end goal is as important as the what. Let's talk about the what. So yes, financial inclusion through entrepreneurship is what we do from a 1% of net profit after tax point of view. Then we've got another entity, which is the CSI Trust, which is an empowerment, a vehicle that was set up as part of Absa's BBEE empowerment transaction. So there we are looking at the E-cubed nexus. So it's entrepreneurship, education, and employability within 3 sectors: digital, green economy, as well as informal economy. So you can say, yeah, but I aligned. Let's look at this one of 1% after tax financial inclusion through entrepreneurship. You can say, yes, I align entrepreneurship, but the question is, what does your program design look like, right? So you can say, yes, I'm doing entrepreneurship, you're doing entrepreneurship, but it's important to double click. What does your design look like? What has informed your model, right? Do you understand the needs of your community? What has informed that from an assumptions point of view? Is there research? What data are you using in terms of developing that particular model to influence communities or to impact communities? What's your impact narrative? How do you know that you would have arrived at your end goal? What's your impact thesis? So how are you accounting for what you're saying you're trying to achieve? So that what is important to us. But also then when we double click and look at the how, right? Going back to your example of a marriage, right? If you're wanting to go on a journey on a covenant of marriage, it's about values as well. But we're not going to ask you and say, okay, list your 5 values, but we look at how you operate as an organization. So we talk about empowering Africa's tomorrow together, one story at a time, because we're a Pan-African organization. And one of those, our ESG priorities, one of them is diversity and inclusion. So when we engage with you, what does your board look like? What does your executive team look like? What does your implementing team look like, right? Because we value diversity, but do you value diversity? Because there's value in diversity. We bring different experiences into the conversation. So are you valuing what we are valuing? Are you a collaborator or ungumahamba yedwa? Right? Where you're a lone ranger, you're an organization that is not collaborating with others in the sector. Are you saying, no, I work at primary school, and once I've delivered my intervention, I've trained them, I've capacitated them, then take? Or are you saying, okay, now that I'm in primary, who's in high school, and how do I come alongside them in terms of this particular journey? So do you collaborate with others, or do you say, this is me, and this is how I do what I do, and this is where I focus? So that's also a values-based. What's your approach in doing what you're doing as a particular organization? Then the obvious one, from a governance practices point of view, you're an organization that we are wanting to come alongside, right? We don't want to come alongside you. We're excited. We get in a community and they say, oh, who's this one? You're coming here with this particular organization. We've had a bad experience. right? So we also do screening, similar to what the lady from MTN was talking about. The reputation of the organization is important. What are your governance practices? What do your finances look like from a compliance point of view, from a SARS point of view? So we also do risk assessment in terms of identifying the particular organizations that we support. Then our funding practices or working practices, how do we work with organizations? Shared value delivery. And I think it's important for us to emphasize that, right? So it's not just about us saying, here's funding, but we're saying, how do we come alongside you? But let me just take a step back. Shared value delivery, we're saying doing good is good for business, right? But it's about doing good that is good for business. So there's an element of saying, how do we amplify social impact, but also how do you drive commercial value? I mean, we heard this morning about the launch of the Trilogue Awards, and in that launch, you said, look, an initiative that's benefiting both the business as well as impacting society. Doing good is good for business. So we bring funding, but we also bring the business along with us, right? So you'll see if we are intervening in higher education and training, where does enterprise development come in terms of supporting our young people who are in higher education and training, as an example. So we bring the business along, but also the staff volunteering initiatives, because we believe that our employees have got expertise which can be leveraged by the NPO sector. As much as we can learn from what you are doing on the ground, I think there's also an opportunity for organizations to learn from the expertise of colleagues. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nonhlanhla. There's a number of things I want to get back to you about during the Q&A session. But next up is Zolani Metu from Funda Wande. How do you work around securing funding, working with donors, and that aspect of what you do?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Sheldon. Molweni Betun. I hope people are good. I think, I'll probably be code switching because there's too much English I've spoken over the past 2 days and it's really getting depleted. I think I want to maybe say Engos Nonhlanhla, and thanks to Mandla as well from FirstRand, because you've basically initiated the conversation on Majola, right? Because I think it's really difficult to talk about partnership and particularly funding partnerships in isolation from talking about Majola, and Majola means relationships. Because the essence, I think, of it is that people partner before organizations can collaborate. We need to actually focus a lot more energy on talking about interpersonal competencies before we start talking about whether or not organizations can collaborate. A lot of the partnerships that we've had have only been possible because two people with shared values that are interpersonal, also working in support of missions that are aligned and all that stuff, have been able to listen to one another, and listening with a keen and interested ear that actually is amplifying respect. So there's an element of those interpersonal competencies that I think, particularly as nonprofits, we don't invest in as much. The second point I want to come to, Sheldon, I know you've asked me a very targeted question. The second point I want to come to is that the development sector is unable to attract the type of talent that corporates can attract. Why is this important? It's important because if we're going to talk about deal making, I think the other NPO representative that spoke earlier on here spoke about some of the competencies that are there in the organization. There's a challenge where Funda Wande is unable to attract Zolani from a banking context, and Zolani coming with a set of competencies that might be helpful in the ability to close deals. That's important because quite often when we are interfacing with investors or funders, the types of questions that are being asked are difficult for an average NPO ExCo member to answer, not because they don't want to, but because from a competency point of view and the ability to attract talent, NGOs are unable to do that. So there's a conversation then around the capacity that Mandla, I think, meandered towards. So I think major gratitude to FirstRand because they've got a program where they capacitate leadership within NGOs. I mean, I got to benefit from it, so happy about that. Went to Stellenbosch Business School being trained as the next generation of trustees. That's important because it helps us understand governance, financial management, understanding just the legal infrastructure that governs the work that we do as NGOs. The question you asked me around attracting funding partners can be easily answered to say, oh, we've got a 103-page long partnerships framework, and I'm sure our partnerships manager, Simtembile, would be happy if I read, that 103-page long partnerships framework. But I do find that what matters more than anything else is an understanding of relationships and how people work. I think that for me is quite important. The second for us has been being able to anchor whatever decisions we're going to make on a binding constraints approach. What do I mean by that? There's a multiplicity of problems that everybody here is trying to solve. Everyone is literally trying to solve everything. And as NPOs, we often think we need more funding because we've been unable to radically prioritize. A binding constraints approach says there are too many constraints in society. The ultimate and favorable solution sits there as a northern star, but there are too many factors that compromise even the solutions that lie on the pathway. So how do you look at constraints and then say, what is actually binding amongst these constraints? As Funda Wande, we've said that the key things that we know definitely improve learning outcomes for foundational literacy and numeracy. It's teacher training, providing high quality materials in classrooms, and ensuring that there's continuous support for teachers. But also quite fundamentally and importantly, I want to invite funders to think about this, providing technical support to government. That's a key lever. We can't sit and complain that government isn't doing anything when you've got departments and provinces that I'm not going to mention that have directorates that only have 2 directors when it's meant to be 6. That's a key challenge that's there. So technical support really plays a key role. It's important for us that we partner with funders who understand the landscape we work in, that I work with government departments that have their own limitations. I also have my own limitations as a non-profit. And so it's important that we anchor whatever partnership on understanding what binding constraints are and understanding what solutions really mean in the context of deep dives, but also in the context of scaling. Thanks, Sheldon.
Zolani, so I'm making notes here from what you put, and we'll come to it certainly in the Q&A session. But I really love that alignment partnership through both of these sessions, and that really does speak to a deeper connection. It's not just transactional. Yeah. I need your funding. You need my points. What's coming out and from everyone I love is about partnership alignment. How do we then take that forward? Nathi, how does Telkom, the Telkom Foundation and Telkom work in terms of their funding practices and partnering with NPOs?
Thanks, Sheldon, and good afternoon, everyone. So from our end, it starts with the multi-year strategy that we've committed ourselves to. We've renewed it or refreshed it in 2022, and we're still going along. And that for us dictates that we work with, firstly, in the education space. We've got certain programs that we focus on, and we seek to improve the uptake of mathematics and science, and also the performance, so in line with what the country has set in terms of the goals in that regard. And our endpoint is actually enabling young people to take up opportunities and to enhance their ability to take up opportunities, whether work opportunities or entrepreneurial opportunities. So in doing so, because of our focus in the ICT sector, so we start by enabling them to firstly gain entry into the fields of study by just making sure the mathematics performance is correct, and then we move with them in that way. Part of also what we do as our integrated approach is to look at psychosocial. Some of these things have been mentioned in the day from our various presenters today, and also the digital literacy. Not forgetting your teacher support in terms of integrating ICT, because one way that we are attacking digital literacy among young people is enabling teachers to be able to bring tech into the classroom. And with all of those, we are unlocking those opportunities where tech can contribute to education and drive young people towards success. And then it's post-school, and then mentorship and all of those things. So by nature of our work that we have set up, so we've got communities that we would have targeted where we want to work, and our approach then is depending on whether we are onboarding those NGOs as solicited proposals. In that regard, we are looking for specialist organizations in particular areas, and we need to know that they've got the capacity to deliver. They are able to account from a budget point of view, and also other areas in terms of meeting our objectives. So there are those differences, and in other communities, we are in those communities because we're doing certain projects and we want to utilize community-based organizations, and then our approach is slightly different because you are working with a single community organization that might not have particular skills, and our approach there is more developmental. We then assist each other in terms of how to account for the work that we do, and. So for us, it depends which approach we are on. For more bigger organizations, national, it's specialist organizations in different fields. That's how we will identify them. And then where it's community specific, we want to work with organizations in that community from a developmental approach. And then if you are looking at some of the criteria that we employ, I've mentioned some of it, but I just want to add the following. For those community-based organizations, how integral in the community are you and the heart of the work that you are doing? Because the rest of the things we can build, but we cannot build the passion, we can't build with you or work with you to help you grow passion and all of those things. I just want to also add that we've got specialists in our organization that obviously are specializing in the different areas that we get involved in, but we also understand that our NPO partners, they also on the ground, and they've got particular systems developed and they've got particular ways of doing things, and we want to match the two to say, how do we then match the two and make sure that we are walking the journey successfully together. And so those are the ways that in which we identify and we partner with organizations. We will set up multi-year funding because that's the nature of the work. We can't just come in and then leave, but we also want to make sure that our NGO partners are able to, outside of the heart, put in measures in place to account for the funding, to account for the social impact that we are looking for in partnering in that way. So those are some of the ways that we work with the NGO partners.
Nathi, thank you very much. That was really illuminating. I'm going to open now to the Q&As. I'm told I missed a hand earlier. Yes, in the back there. I see you, ma'am. Thank you very much. If we can get a mic to her. In the meantime, while we're getting a mic, Nonhlanhla, I want to turn to you and turning inward towards Absa, and I think the learnings that I think other corporates and organizations in the funding space can learn from Absa. I mean, you're quite mature in your CSI strategy, one of the biggest contributors. How have you been able to build the type of skills and competencies into the organization that allows you to engage with, with its solicited, unsolicited applications or approaches to allow you to engage with the NPOs and the implementers on the ground in terms of the actual work they're doing, and not just from a quantitative point of view, in terms of tick boxing, financials and the like. How have you been able to build that in to ensure you've got the right skills and competencies in your CSI space within Absa, to ensure your projects that you align with and your own strategies are impactful?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's important, Sheldon, is that the competencies don't just lie within the CSI unit, but we then look at from an organizational point of view. So remember I spoke about bringing the organization along, right? So I think what's important is that when you're looking at a shared value model, you say, what do I need within the unit to be able to deliver what I need? But also, what do I need within the organization to deliver what I need? And that's one of the things that we've been able to do really well. We talk about an ecosystem approach and how we deliver the work that we do. So in taking an ecosystem approach, you're then saying there's skills within enterprise development unit, there's skills within relationship banking, the SME segment. There's value in collaborating with group procurement. There's value in coordinating with your CIB colleagues who are working with corporate clients. Because if you're saying, I want to unlock access to market for our beneficiaries who are entrepreneurs, who's going to buy from them? You bring procurement along because they've got certain skills that they need to then talk about in terms of sharing with the organizations that we're working with. And then, like I mentioned, then you've got your CIB. But in how the unit is constituted, it's that it's important to look at what is needed to deliver on the work that you're doing, which is the question that you also ask. I mean, there's value in saying, how do we design initiatives that are relevant and are going to get us to where we are wanting? So having those particular skills in terms of driving initiatives that are designed for impact is important. Having skills related to M&E capability, that is important, because we don't just fund and we don't follow the money. Remember, I said we bring the whole business along, right? So having the right M&E capability within the team is also particularly important. We then have a financial literacy design, inclusion in terms of our particular function, because yet again, we've got, yes, a mandate in terms of the scorecard from a BBBE point of view, but also in alignment with who we are as an entity. We are a financial services organization, so the question is, how do you take those expertise into the community? So there's certain skills that are needed from a function point of view, but there's an importance to leverage the rest of the organization in terms of adding value to the organizations that we work with from a community point of view.
Okay, thank you, Nonhlanhla. Ma'am, if you'll just identify yourself and then we'll take your question. Thank you.
Yes, Stephanie Brown from Kusudi Law, and thank you for the comments. And I think the last speaker, a bit of a nice introduction into my question, which is about collaboration and also, I think, capacity building. So one of the challenges that came out of yesterday's discussion for nonprofits is how can we collaborate to amplify our impact? And I guess I also wanted to ask the speakers in particular about their thoughts on, is there an opportunity for corporates to collaborate to, effectively, I guess, increase the impact of the resources that they spend? And I think, a particular issue that seems to keep coming up is capacity within nonprofits. And I think I just want to quote one of the speakers yesterday. I can't remember who said it, but she said, what would happen if we set aside our logos and our egos? Could we create more?
Zolani, you look like you're itching to comment. Let's start off with you. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, I've got very particular opinions on that, and I keep looking at my comms manager here, and I don't know why he's sitting in front of me. I think that's such a brilliant, I think, question for me, particularly because even the conversation around collaboration has been about NPOs collaborating. The NGOs need to work together so that, the corporates spend less money on something else that could be financed elsewhere along the value chain, which again is quite critical. It's important. I think more than anything else, I haven't spoken to a single leader in an NPO that doesn't see or comprehend the need to collaborate. All of us talk about it and we see its value. The doing of it and the know-how of how to do it, I think that's where the challenge is. But also the second thing, collaboration costs money. Just last week, I was on a learning exchange between the Eastern Cape and KZN Department of Education that Funda Wande organized because we're trying to scale our program to KZN. It takes money for us to be able to actually showcase to the Chief Directorate and the DDG that this is what this program is about, and for them to actually understand what it's about. We also support something called the Reading Panel, right, which is chaired by Umamphumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, and the Reading Panel plays an incredible role in shaping the discourse on foundational literacy and numeracy in South Africa. Again, there, we have to play a role in supporting our government officials to be able to attend attend things like the reading panel, to be able to leverage and benefit from such things. Again, those are the costs of collaboration. If I'm going to think about a partnership with any other NGO, I need to think about that coffee I'm going to drink when we go have the conversation we need to have. And so if I go back to investors and say, oh, I went and had coffee, they're going to ask, oh, but where in the proposal was this coffee? In the grant agreement, this coffee isn't there. But again, I think there's a mutual understanding that partnerships cost money. I'm glad there are too many bankers in the room because nobody understands that more than bankers do. I do come from a bank as well, and I've seen what it actually takes for bankers to be able to close the deals that they close. And so I think there's maybe an extension of trying to understand that even from a non-profit point of view, we go through similar lengths in order to be able to close the deals that we do close with the organizations we work with.
Thank you, Zolani. Just a point of correction there. When we're talking about funding, there can never be too many bankers in the room. Please, we need to fill as many of the spaces with them. No, but thank you, Zolani, and I think your ability to see the process from both sides is very valuable and I think important to this conversation. So thank you for that question, ma'am. Nathi, I want to come to you and building on that question from your perspective, you know, as Zolani mentioned, a lot about NPO collaboration. Yes, there's been a lot more discussion, thoughts on business collaboration. We do know there are really strong and good business industry bodies as such. From an organization like Telkom, how do you view that type of collaboration when it comes to, you know, people or organizations which may be in your traditional space, competitors as such?
Yeah. Look, in this room or similar rooms, we've spoken a lot about collaboration, and I think it's something that we, from a talking point of view, we have exhausted, and I think the doing part is the one, as everybody says. From a Telkom point of view, we are open to that, but I also want to maybe to caution about being too hard on ourselves in this room, because collaboration does happen, right? There are initiatives which I can quote where you see a lot of corporates coming together under one banner of that initiative, right? So it does happen. And I think what we are looking for is when we sit around the table and agree that we are all just pushing one thing and, you know, everybody, you know, has a piece in this thing. But we do collaborate as corporates, but I think we don't feel it is enough. And I think we need to do a little bit more. So from a Telkom Foundation perspective, we are very open to that, and we do go around trying to search and see how we can work with other partners. And I must say that in my engagements with fellow corporate leaders, it hasn't been an issue. It may be an issue that you are in a community I'm not yet in. You are working with a cohort, I'm not. So those are the things that seem to create misalignments. But I don't think that from a willingness point of view, we are short. It's just those things that we may need to align going forward.
I think you make two very important points there. One being, we need to be critical, we need to reflect, and we need to be ambitious about the pathway forward. But I think in the same vein, we've got to say there is a lot of good work being done. Yeah. The fact that we're all in this room, the fact that you know, whether you see it in research coming out, whether you see it in you know, the actual impact on the ground, is being done. And what I really like is that we keep challenging ourselves to say, well, how can we do it better? How can we do it better? And I think that, for me, is really encouraging in terms of, you know, not leaving here with doom and gloom, you know, but to say that there is good work being done, but we realize and we're honest to say that work, you know, how can we improve it? Because the problems that we face, unfortunately, are that great. So thank you very much for that one, Nathi. Nonhlanhla, I want to come to you because there's a question posed here by Karen Kochi. She was one of our panelists on on the earlier panels before lunch. She says, to what extent do foundations or donors aim to learn from the NGO partners? Do they accept the possibility that they may need to build their own capacity to engage equitably with NPOs?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of my opening remarks, I spoke to the civil society sector having expertise, right? And there's definitely room for us to learn from the NPO sector. You know the communities better than we do. We create those spaces of learning, one amongst the NPOs that we are supporting in terms of our end. I mean, we just had a workshop with all of those, with organizations where we're delivering interventions within the basic schooling space, brought them together into a room and said, let's learn, let's understand from one another. You implementing this particular initiative, how does it touch on another intervention? And we create those spaces, firstly for NPOs to collaborate and us to learn from the organizations. I think we'd be naive to think that there isn't an opportunity for us to learn from the organizations that we are supporting. And two, I mean, you saw Professor Anastasia Mamabolo, you know, our chair in entrepreneurship was based at Gibbs, right? We're saying, how do we learn together with you? We're also funding some work that we're doing with the Ellen Gray Center for Africa Entrepreneurship, because we're on a journey of saying we are wanting to learn from the communities that we are actually supporting and funding. We also create spaces of dialogue between ourselves and the organizations that we fund, but also between ourselves and beneficiaries and the organizations that are funding them. So spaces of conversation and dialogue, because we can only get sharper, our models can only get sharper when we engage with the beneficiaries. But also going back in terms of how we do funding, that we don't then just fund and then walk away. We say, how do we come alongside you?
Yeah.
And in coming alongside you, even the business comes alongside you as we try to learn together to solution for the issues of our country.
Nonhlanhla, thank you very much. What a perfect point for us to end. As I said, I knew this time was going to fly by. Thank you very much to our panelists, Nonhlanhla, Zolani, and Nathi.
Thank you.
If you give them a round of applause, please. I'd now like to welcome Natasha Francis from the Sanlam Foundation. She's the Finance and Governance Senior Manager at the Foundation. And I'd also like to welcome up Anne Coetzee. She's the CEO of Little Eden Society. Thank you both, Natasha and Anne. Natasha, let's kick off with you. From the Sanlam Foundation and Sanlam as an organization perspective, how do you view partnering and how do you practically partner with NPOs?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Sheldon. And I'm so privileged to be part of this discussion because this is something really close to my heart in terms of empowering nonprofit organizations to maximize funding opportunities. With the Sanlam Foundation, we take collaboration very seriously. We co-create, we work closely with our partners. So while we lead CSI initiatives across the Sanlam Group, driving long-term sustainability within the communities to empower them for that, we also we provide two types of grants, right, which is linked to how we collaborate. So the first type of grant is high investment, high impact, long-standing, long-term relationship with the partner. And I'll touch on that in a little bit more detail because I know everybody wants to hear about that. And then the second type of grant we do is what we refer to it as a small grant fund. And small doesn't sound really nice, but it's multiple NPOs that benefit from once-off grants up to 100,000. And these are NPOs that are doing phenomenal work in their communities to uplift the livelihoods of the vulnerable there. And these projects, this funds projects focusing on youth, children with disabilities, people with disabilities, vulnerable, orphaned, and abused children, as well as gender-based violence causes. So that's the one leg. And I think a key thing to mention here in terms of how we collaborate and how we engage with NPOs that apply for these grants. So these grants can be applied for on our digital grant management system, which is on our website, accessible on our website. And we take applications, multitudes of applications, and we go through a selection process. So obviously there's some criteria that has to be met. And it doesn't just end there. So the person that's applying, or the NPO that's applying, will apply, and then we'll go through their stuff, we'll engage with them, we'll let them know, this is where you're at, this is what you're missing. You need this, did you realize this, can we help you with this? So we walk that journey with them until we get to the final approved NPOs that are selected. But like I said, these are once-off, and we say up to 100,000 per annum. The second type is the core grants, which is the multi-year grants. This is where the real partnership and collaboration comes in. This is where we co-create and we look for NPOs that live the passion and see the passion and align with our values and our team's values. So while there's criteria that need to be met to qualify for these because of the high investment and the long period, and some of which include, an applicant would need to demonstrate their ability to have a developed operating model, which is supported by MEL. They will also need to demonstrate that they've delivered impact which is aligned to the objectives that we're trying to achieve, and that they are sustainable for the foreseeable future. That just kicks off over and above the governance documentation we will require, which Shelly mentioned earlier. I'm not going to repeat. That just kicks off the start of the collaboration, where that's where the magic happens with us and our team, where we work with them to co-create, to design, and to develop these programs that will form long-term impacts for the communities we want to serve.
Thank you very much, Natasha.
That's a question.
That's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to turn to you from your perspective and a CEO of the Little Eden Society and your extensive experience in the sector, both from a corporate and the non-profit lens. How does Little Eden partner with corporates, and how do you bring your expertise to that process?
Well, thank you, first of all, and thank you for the privilege of being able to speak here. I have had the opportunity when I was at university at Wits to work with Nelson Mandela's daughters, and I started my journey with human rights and looking at the NPO environment very nearly 40 years ago, and I had the opportunity to meet Nelson Mandela after his freedom. And one of the things that struck me that he said that has been the foundation of everything that I've done in the NPO sector has been, you need to make a difference in order to live a life of significance. So I've had the opportunity to work on both the corporate side as to assist in terms of corporate social responsibility, but I've also been able to work on the NPO side. And I took over as CEO of Little Eden during the course of last year. Little Eden is an organization that is 58 years old. It started in 1967, probably older than many of the people in the room over here. And we work in a sector that isn't the warm fuzzies. We work with profound intellectual and physical disability. So these are people that very often will never walk, will never speak, they will be incontinent. And the sad reality is that the large majority of our residents, we provide a residential facility for 300 residents with 268 staff. It is a 24/7, 365-day-a-year facility. But we are working with people that over 70% of them have been abandoned, because working with profound disability is incredibly difficult. Not only in rural communities, it's often believed to be a cause of witchcraft or a curse, but alternatively for people that actually have a child that is born into their family that is severely or profoundly intellectually or physically disabled, it is emotionally and financially draining. So when you start looking at Little Eden from that point of view, it means that we have to have a very different approach, because this is not the fuzzy animal at animal welfare. This is not save the rhino. This is not clean the Yixkay River or educate someone. This is largely a person that no one else wants. So how do you find money from a donor to fund a resident, whether it be a child? Our youngest is 3 years old and is in our care because the mother tried to burn her to death, all the way to our oldest resident, who is 69 years old and has been with us for more than 50 years. So what I'm going to share with you is the approach that we've actually used to try and actually work with donors and show them why it's important to be involved in an environment that isn't always attractive, because all of us are actually competing for a portion of the pie. There's only so much money out there for donations, for funding. Why would any organization, be corporate, want to donate to you? So we need to start with the why. Why do you as an NPO exist? What is the goal and the driving force behind your organization? Because the days of simple checkbook philanthropy are gone. No donor out there is just going to give money because you seem to have a cause. The founders of our organization are long since passed away. But they're actually up for sainthood by the Vatican at the moment because of the incredible work that they did. They are referred to as the servants of God, Domitilla and Danny Himes, because they were looking at making a change in the world. So our corporate partners that we work with now are actively seeking strategic alignment with their values. How do you share as an NPO with those values that are out, with a donor with those NPO values? How do you make measurable, tangible impact? And how do you create authentic, meaningful relationships? So we quite simply have a pyramid process that we follow. We need to start at the base with value alignment, where to from here. We need to look at a mutual benefit design. So what we're focusing on is things like high value events, high visibility events. Are you prepared to go and speak at their events, and are you prepared to have them speak and engage with you at yours? What about employee engagement opportunities? What are we doing about getting our staff involved, our staff equipped, our staff equipped and evaluated in terms of their skills? Remember I said I have 268 staff who are caregivers 24/7, 365 days of the year. What exactly are you doing over there? You do know the flashing is her time, not mine. Secondly, we need to look at how do we create impactful reports in order to give that donor an understanding about where their money has gone. If I can tell you that we have a resident in our facility that was locked in a cupboard for 13 years because they were profoundly intellectually disabled. So if you're a donor for our organization, your money saved that child from being locked in a cupboard for 13 years. We have got a family of 4 who have a genetic condition. All 4 children have a genetic condition. They were locked in a chicken coop. Jeez. Your money has given them a life. And that's what we mean about impactful reports. It's about storytelling. So that when you ultimately implement whatever your strategy is, there are 5 key things that you're looking for. Quite simply, do you understand the corporate landscape of the donor that you're working with? Secondly, are you able to personalize your approach? Your one-stop or your one-size-fits-all proposal doesn't work. It needs to be customized to that donor, what their corporate social responsibility is, and how their money is going to make a difference to you. Thirdly, you've got to think beyond cash. This begging bowl approach that most NPOs have out there is probably the biggest reason why donors don't want to donate. So you've got to start looking at things like volunteer engagement, pro bono services, workplace giving, matching gifts, in-kind donations, sustainability. We have a pecan nut farm to help run the costs. Our facility costs 60 million rand a year to run. That is a significant amount of money to find. You've got to find internal champions, people from the executive all the way down to the cleaner that is prepared to be passionate about what you do. And finally, as I said, that report has to have impact. So the key that we have found that makes a difference with an organization that is not a warm fuzzy, quite simply, it's looking at this is a very competitive landscape in which we are operating at the moment. And we are committed to developing corporate relationships based on shared value creation, authentic engagement, and measurable impact that we can celebrate together. Two of my team from the Business Development Office are here today, and they are champions at making a difference. And we'd be happy to engage with any of you to share with you what we have done to be a success. 58 years, 300 residents. We've had over 1,200 that spend their entire lives with our facility. Speaks about the success of Little Eden and what we have done.
And what a powerful presentation. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And I mean, I can tell you from, you partake in our handbook research every year. So thank you very much for that. And, from that, the success you've built for, Little Eden with the, the obstacles you face. And what would your message be to corporates in terms of the areas that you work in? Because, if you think about ECD, there's a life cycle of when the child is in the program. Same with primary, same with high school, and then obviously tertiary as well. So there's kind of life cycles manageable. But what you've described is a lifetime. How do you then partner with donors, just briefly, for other NPOs who may be in a similar position or, could learn from that? How do you partner with donors when your horizon is that long?
I think one of the key things that we've looked at, so our donor base is about 31,000 donors, which in itself is quite staggering. When I joined the organization, I couldn't believe that we were looking at 31,000 donors. But the 80-20 principle applies to whether you're looking at 10 or you're looking at 30,000. Only 20% of them are going to be directly engaged in your organization on an ongoing basis. So some of the things that you need to look at. Now let's start with the person that's donating 200 Rand a month. Do you actually contact that 200 Rand person, or do we keep focusing on the person or the corporate that is donating 100,000 or 1 million Rand over a repeated period of time? Because we forget that the 200 Rand person, if we gave him a phone call or her a phone call and said, Natasha, thank you so much. We really appreciate your 200 Rand. Do you think you'd be prepared to increase that by 50 Rand this next year? If your NPO has been going for 58 years, you have phoned them 58 times from 200 Rand, so you're no longer sitting with 200 Rand. You're now sitting with a few thousand Rand. And they are contacting you every single year. You're also trying to look at, so we do happen to have a donor that has given us a repeat donation of 4 million Rand a year for over the last 7 years. But we've had to show impact in terms of their business, understand why they exist, and ensure that you actually can align with them and have an impact on their bottom line. So when we talk about this impact report, it needs to show what's done, because this is not going to be a once-off. And I think the key is storytelling. Tell your recipient's story, whatever that story is. I told you about the cupboard and the chicken coop and the little girl that they tried to burn to death. But we also work on outreaches. So we have partnered not just with other NPOs that have money. So we have just initiated once again, after some years where it hasn't been active, where we're working on the likes of Diepsloot, one of the poorest townships in Gauteng. We work in Garankuwa. We work in the impoverished informal communities around Bela Bela. Last week I spent my time in Lethe. Lethe is near the Swazi border, where these types of people exist, but they don't have the resources. Wheelchairs are expensive. They're anything from 20 to 80,000 Rand for one wheelchair. So we partner with other organizations like the Sweetheart Foundation, the Page Project, because we look at them and say, how can we partner together? I might not have the money, but I have the knowledge and the skills, but you've got something. You're prepared to revamp old wheelchairs. So we need to be creative. We need to be out there. I passionately believe those words of Nelson Mandela. What we do has impact. But we need to understand why we're doing it.
Yeah.
Because the donor buys into your passion.
And you're not short of passion. And,
No, I'm not.
and thank you very much. Please do give her a round of applause. And I know we've obviously come to the end of our time, but as Anne mentioned, both her and her team are here. So if you would like to pick their brains, please do so after the program is done. And I definitely think there is a webinar or something else that we can do as trialogue. So watch the space around it, because you touch on really interesting and very practical points. That's what I love. You're able to leave here with very practical points. Natasha, just to end off with you quickly. In terms of Sanlam, so you mentioned there's your core CSI investments and part of it, I suppose, part of your portfolio, yeah. And then you also mentioned the smaller grants, right? So in terms of just touching on those, for people to leave here practically, NPOs, what sort of development sectors do you cover within those two, or in fact within all of your CSI strategy?
So we do consumer financial education. So we've got 5 pillars, right? So one is consumer financial education. That's upskilling and enabling people to live with more financially confident, which is one of Sanlam's passions, right, and values. Then it's enterprise supply development. So that's another pillar. And I'm talking about the pillars for our core grants, right? Then we have special projects, SED programs, and one of our biggest programs under there is our education, focusing on ECD, right? We're starting off with ECD. It's quite an exciting program that has multiple elements in there to bring it all together. We also have, within the SED space, we have programs looking at environmental change, climate and the like, as well as bridging programs for students who don't necessarily immediately qualify to get into tertiary education, and programs that assist learners from the grades of 10 up to matric with preparing for exams, so on and so forth. Then we also have a very exciting staff volunteerism program where the likes of your nonprofit could be listed, and we could get Sanlam staff members to volunteer. Yes, please do. Sanlam staff members will sign up, and there's skills volunteering, there's payroll giving, there's a multitude of ways in which Sanlam staff can assist and get involved in your organization as well as other nonprofit organizations. And then we also look after, as one of our pillars, Sanlam Alliance, because Sanlam Foundation is not just focused on South Africa, but broader Africa.
Okay.
And then in terms of the small grants, like I said, those grants are mainly funding projects that are looking at local communities and making a difference in the livelihoods of those vulnerable there, and they'll focus on youth, people with disability, children that are abused, orphaned, vulnerable, and gender-based violence.
Okay.
Can
I take it on the audience if they could connect with you at your stand and your team afterwards as well?
Absolutely. And
awesome, and we just saw the little connection happening here between Little Eden and the Sanlam Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, please give Natasha and Anne a round of applause.
Thank you.